Quick, guys, make sure you hit that subscribe button within the next 5 seconds in order to... Welcome to the Creative Control Room Podcast, episode number 118. I'm your operator, Ryan Hafey. This is my Creative Control Room, and this is a podcast for podcasters. In this week's show, we're going to be doing part 2 of a new series that I like to call IACTAMAP, which stands for I Ask ChatGPT to Ask Me About Podcasting. And this is where we talk with ChatGPT. We give it a prompt. We have ChatGPT ask me specific questions about certain aspects of the podcasting game. So in the last episode, we talked about podcast gear and editing tips. In this one, we're going to be focusing specifically on podcast marketing. So we're going to create a prompt. We're going to ask ChatGPT to ask me questions about how to basically get your podcast out there. So that's what we're going to be doing. It feels good to be back. I took a week off. As I mentioned in last week's episode, I went out to a little small town called Edwards, Illinois, which is about 15, 20 minutes west of Peoria, Illinois. Spent a week out there, visited some family, got to see some friends I haven't seen in a while. It was a good time. I was a little disappointed that I didn't get to see more snow. Actually, the day after I left Las Vegas, it actually snowed in Las Vegas and rained all day in Peoria. Wasn't expecting that. It is what it is. Still had a good time nonetheless. But yeah, so moving on. We're going to talk to ChatGPT here shortly, but what I wanted to do first was, I guess we'll call this, question or tip of the week. I don't really have like a fancy name for it or anything like that, but I figured what I would do, or at least try to do on a semi-regular basis, is pull some questions that I get from social media, whether it be on YouTube or TikTok, Instagram, whatever it may be, and feature one of them here for all of you to take advantage of and gain some insight from as well. So recently I got a comment on TikTok in response to a video I posted about the Sony ZV-1, which I still believe is a great kind of all-around camera and also a good camera for podcasting. I have a ZV-1 right here above me. This is kind of like my top-down camera, which I don't use a ton. But it's a good camera. Could be used as an A-cam if you wanted it to. Anyway, someone commented on that post and was asking if it can be used with Zoom. Like if you wanted to conduct an interview, could you use the ZV-1 as your camera, your angle for a Zoom call? The answer is yes. And it's not just specific to the ZV-1. This is the Sony A6500 I'm talking into. You could use this camera. Really, any camera that offers a clean HDMI output, you can use for Zoom. It just requires a little bit of setup. So I did a video response to this person on TikTok. Rather than going through all of that once again, I'm going to show this TikTok video that I made. By the way, if you'd like, you can always follow me over on TikTok at Ryan Hafey and follow along for more podcasting related content. But without further ado, this was my response to that individual who asked about the ZV-1. Yes, it does. So this person is asking if the Sony ZV-1 can work with Zoom, and it can. It requires a little bit of setup, but let me walk you through how that works. So here is my Sony ZV-1. So what you have to do is you have to get the clean HDMI feed out using a micro HDMI, I believe it is, to HDMI. That's going to need to connect to a capture card of some kind. I have an ATEM Mini, which works as a capture card. You don't need an ATEM Mini. You can just use like a Cam Link 4K. But the cable would go from here to your capture card and into your computer. Once you get it into your computer, you can now pull your feed into OBS. And over here, I have a Zoom meeting going. You can see that you don't see my feed yet, but all you would need to do in OBS is click Start Virtual Camera. And then in Zoom, you would just need to make sure that you have your OBS virtual camera selected, and you can use your Sony ZV-1 on Zoom. There you have it. Hope that was helpful for some of you out there. Now, without further ado, let's have a conversation with ChatGPT. So as mentioned in the introduction, we are going to be talking to ChatGPT specifically today about podcast marketing. This is the IACTAMAP series. I asked ChatGPT to ask me about podcasting. And there's the point of this series is twofold. Number one, it's I want to learn how to better interact with AI. And I think this is going to be good practice for me when it comes to creating prompts to get the responses that I want from AI, specifically ChatGPT in this case. Also, it allows me to use AI to help share some of the knowledge that I have about podcasting with all of you. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to read. Unlike last time, I'm not going to type it out in real time. That took too long. So I did type this out in advance, but I haven't really gone through the questions. So we're going to read the prompt, and then I'm going to go through the questions one by one and answer them to the best of my abilities. If there's a question that ChatGPT asks and it stumps me a little bit, or maybe I want to elaborate on it, I'll make a note of it and I will address it in the next episode of this series. But without further ado, let's jump into the prompt. So the prompt that I gave ChatGPT this time around is as follows. I want you to play the role of someone who has started a video podcast. You've published a number of episodes already, but despite following all the best practices for publishing a video podcast on YouTube and having eye-catching branding, you are not seeing the views, subscriber growth, and engagement that you were hoping for. You are given the opportunity to have a brief meeting with someone who is very knowledgeable in video podcast marketing. What questions do you ask this person about podcast marketing to get the most value out of the short time you have with them? Now, the goal of this prompt, obviously, first you're telling ChatGPT what you want them to do, how you want them to behave. And then I'm trying to give enough information in the situation for ChatGPT to know what it knows and to know what it doesn't know so that it knows what to ask. I think that makes sense. So I wanted it to come up with questions that were specific, but also meaningful in a circumstance where you're only given a limited amount of time to ask someone who might be able to help you. So if you're given a short period of time, what specific and just specific questions would you ask that person? And it looks like ChatGPT gave me 7 questions to work with this time. So let's go ahead and jump into these. Question number 1, ChatGPT asks, how can I improve my video podcast discoverability? Despite following the best practices for publishing on YouTube, I'm not getting enough views or subscribers. Discoverability. Okay, well, I have a feeling that this is the answer to this question is going to filter down and into a lot of the questions, subsequent questions here. But that's a very broad question. I know last time too, I was a little harsh with ChatGPT for asking questions that are very broad. When in reality, it's my fault because I'm not asking the right questions. But how do you get discovered more? What's the best way to get your podcast discovered? ChatGPT, you say that you are following the best practices when publishing on YouTube. I think there's always ways that you can improve when publishing on YouTube. That includes, better titles, better thumbnails, more, visually engaging thumbnails, utilizing SEO-rich text in the description, and making sure that you're including tags. All of those things, everything on the back end should be well optimized to make sure that when people are searching on YouTube, they're searching, you will pop up in searches. But beyond that, just staying within YouTube for the moment, YouTube Shorts is a great feature. If you haven't utilized it already, it's just short form video, vertical video, less than a minute. And because it's a new feature and YouTube's trying to compete with, like TikTok and Instagram Reels, they are putting a lot behind it, and people are finding it very easy to get a lot of exposure through YouTube Shorts. In fact, I've seen a big uptick in my subscribers, in my views, just simply from creating YouTube Shorts and uploading them to my channel, just taking clips from my episodes and publishing them to YouTube, and then also taking them and publishing on TikTok and on Instagram Reels and utilizing social media elsewhere. YouTube also has a feature where you can create a short from your content right on YouTube. And in doing so, it links back directly to the original video. So if I open up one of my full podcasts, cut out a clip that I turn into a short, someone can watch that and click right back into the full episode, which is going to obviously drive more views to the full episode. The downside of that is you don't have as many options for editing. I personally, when I create shorts from my episodes, I like to, kind of cut things up a little bit, edit things, shorten it up, get rid of breaks and breaths and ums and things like that. So if it works for you, great. That could be an option. Yeah, I think we'll stop there because I have a feeling that we'll probably touch on more of these things as we go through some of these questions. Question number 2 from ChatGPT. How can I improve my video podcast engagement with my viewers? I want to make sure that my viewers are actively engaging and interacting with my content. Well, there's a number of things you could do there. I mean, obviously, within the content, asking people to do things like liking and subscribing, just gives you a little boost in the algorithm. Actively asking things within your content, people's like, hey, what do you think of this or that? Leave a comment and let me know. Doing things like after you post or publish a podcast, including a pinned comment that people see as soon as they open up your video, especially if someone's looking to comment, they might see that pinned video. Maybe ask a question like, what did you think of this week's episode? Or what did you think of this particular thing that we talked about in this week's episode? Again, staying on YouTube, utilizing the community feature. The community feature is kind of like a home feed on like Facebook, where you can actually type text updates and post photos and things like that. I think it's an underrated feature of YouTube as far as engagement goes and should be utilized a little bit more. That's a good way to engage people on your channel and to get people back to your full episode as well. Actively engage in interacting with my content. And I mean, outside of that, you just have to make engaging content. If you're creating shorts, just try to make sure that those shorts are engaging. With long form content, you don't have to worry quite as much about, especially if you have a longer form podcast and that's sort of, what people watch you for and that's how people consume your content. They're not going to be worried about something that's going to instantly get their attention. For example, like if you're scrolling on Instagram, it's a best practice on Instagram and TikTok and even if you're creating YouTube shorts, to really create content that's going to instantly grab your attention. Otherwise, people are just going to flip on through. But typically speaking, if people go to YouTube, they're there to watch longer form content. In some cases, if they're consuming podcasts, especially. So you don't have to worry about, right away, right out of the gate, grabbing attention. It helps to keep people engaged, especially for new viewers. But it's really more important when creating shorts content. So if you're doing the short form content, make sure that you are grabbing attention as quickly as possible. That's going to keep people around, and they're going to be more willing to engage in your content. I think that covers about everything. Okay, let's move on to number 3. How can I effectively promote my video podcast on social media? I have been using social media to promote my podcast, but it doesn't seem to be generating much engagement. Okay, so yeah, we've touched on this a little bit. ChatGPT, we need to stop, the goal here, ChatGPT, is to ask the most specific questions that you can. Your questions, the answers to your questions overlap. And maybe you don't know this because you don't know much about podcast marketing, ChatGPT, and I get it. But think a little bit more about this, how some of these questions might overlap a little bit. Because now you're just wasting time with this person you don't have much time with. You know what I mean? Anyway, effectively promote on social media. So we've talked about this a little bit already. YouTube Shorts. If you haven't done it already, make sure you do it. If you can, optimally create shorts from your longer form content that can link back automatically to your full episodes. Create content that is very engaging from the get, whether it starts out with something exciting or maybe some text, some kind of intriguing text that people see and want to learn more about. Some people, what I find works well is if I work in boxing, for example, create a lot of boxing content. If you open a video with kind of like a key punch from a highlight of a fight, and then you go into the longer highlight right after that, people are more willing to stick around. Like, whoa, what led to that big fight? Or maybe you show like the immediate reaction to someone getting knocked out. And then people can Like, wow, what happened? What happened there? What led to this celebration, in the ring? So, create content like that. Experiment. If you're not seeing the results you want from the social media, from posting content on the social media channels where you're currently posting, try some additional channels. There's some people still have great success with some things on Pinterest, I imagine. I haven't been on Pinterest for a long time, but depending on the kind of content you create, that could be a good place for you to create some content. LinkedIn is apparently still a great place to get some pretty low cost, I don't mean low cost monetarily, but just, low effort engagement. You can create some content and post there, and then just experiment and see what works best. Look through some of the content that you've already posted, find some that maybe outperform some of the others, try to figure out what you did within those posts that made them a little bit more popular than some of your other posts, and run with that. Just, experiment, see what works best. Okay. Yeah. And if you're sharing all this stuff to social media and it's not generating a lot of engagement, chances are it really comes down to the content. You might just need to rethink the content that you're creating. It just might not be resonating with your audience in the way you would like. That was number 3. Question number 4 from ChatGPT. How can I improve the quality of my podcast content to make it more appealing to my audience? I want to create content that my viewers will find interesting and informative. That is a very, that question depends really, I think, from person to person. Depends on what your niche is, depends on, maybe that would be a good thing to add for the next ChatGPT prompt, is like asking about a specific niche. That might make the questions more specific. I'll have to write that down. But how to improve the quality of the podcast content? Well, you could start the actual, the substance, the actual what you say and present in the podcast aside for a moment. One thing you can do is try to improve the quality of your podcast, whether that be, get some better lighting, maybe upgrade to a better camera. As I've said before, audio is a big thing. If your audio sucks, it's going to be hard for someone to sit around and listen to however, in half an hour to an hour or whatever of your podcast, because it's just going to be like knives stabbing in your ears. So think about upping your quality game is just as far as the production value. And then as far as the content itself, that's a tough one, because you kind of got to look internally a little bit there. You got to ask yourself, would I be interested in the content that I'm creating? And if the answer is no, or if you're a little bit bored by the stuff that you're creating, then you might need to change things up a little bit. Also think about, look at your intros and your outros and other elements you include in your podcast. If you've got like a super long intro that's like a couple minutes long, there's really no need for that. I hate it enough as it is, like sitting, there's those podcasts where they load up all their ads in the beginning, like 5 or 6 minutes of ads, and I just sit there and fast forward through all of them. It's the same thing with a long intro, especially if it's the same intro every episode and it's always 2 minutes. I don't want to sit through a 2-minute episode or 2-minute intro every episode of your podcast. That's why, my podcast intro is literally just like 3 seconds, and then we're right into it. Or at least that's my goal, at least, to just keep the intro short. Nobody cares about the intro. Make it memorable, make it short, get right into the content. Keep it flowing, keep it moving. Try not to repeat yourself too much. And again, experiment. Look back and see what kind of episodes have performed maybe a little bit better than others. I've seen a lot of the episodes I've done so far have been pretty gear focused, and that's because people like to hear about gear, especially in podcasting. So focus on that maybe a little bit more than some other subjects, because that's just the stuff that people want to hear about. So you could do that. You could run some polls on other social media channels. Hey, like what are you interested in hearing about? Maybe just the stuff that you're presenting is just not exactly resonating with the audience that you are intending to capture. Some tips there. That was number 4. Number 5, how can I leverage my existing audience to gain more subscribers and increase engagement? I want to make sure that my current viewers are actively sharing and promoting my podcast to their friends and followers. You can ask. That helps a lot in certain circumstances. Like there's been, I've seen videos, or I think there's even been studies that are done on it. Like when there's been other YouTubers who have kind of run their own experiments and tests where they've discovered, like, if you actively ask your audience to perform an action, they are much more likely to do it. I have 3 kids, and they often watch like a lot of gamer YouTubers, not exactly podcasting, but the same thing applies. And I'm personally annoyed by it when I watch these. I mean, it's not, I'm not their target audience anyway, but what they do a lot is like, hey guys, make sure you smash that subscribe button, hit that like button. They're very, or they'll do things like, quick guys, make sure you hit that subscribe button within the next 5 seconds in order to whatever it may be. I find that super annoying, but I could see how, the target audience there is your kids, is kids. I could see how that would entice them to be like, oh, we got to go and subscribe or whatever. So think about your audience and think about what makes them act a certain way, and try to create messaging around that. Again, you can, so just actively asking for those things within your content. If you have a website, making it easy to share some of your content. If you're posting your stuff on social media, people can obviously retweet. You can ask for like, hey, it would be great if you could please share. Utilizing things like cards on YouTube to make it easy for people to, click and subscribe and do all of those things. It's a big ask to have your audience share a piece of your content. There's got to be some kind of a value exchange. So you need to be creating a lot of value for these people in order for them to want to share your content. If you're not creating quality content, if you're not providing some kind of value for your audience, then there's really no incentive for them to share. So focus on the quality of things there. And then, I think that would be step number 1. And then when you feel like you've reached that, then go out of your way to ask your audience to help you out. Don't overdo it. You can overdo it for sure, and it can get really annoying, but it does work when done well and when done selectively. All right, what was that? Number 5. Okay, so number 6, right? That was number 5. Yeah. Question number 6 from ChatGPT. How can I monetize my podcast? I want to explore different monetization options to help support my podcast and increase its reach. This is a strange question because, number 1, monetization really doesn't have much to do with podcast marketing. I mean, the more you market, the more opportunities you have to monetize, but that's not really what the prompt was asking for. The other part that I find a little strange, Mr. ChatGPT, is you want to explore monetizations options to help support the podcast and increase its reach. Monetization is not going to help you increase your reach. I mean, we'll talk about monetization a little bit, but there are really endless ways to monetize a podcast. I mean, the most traditional are through YouTube ads. If your channel is eligible to do that, you can utilize YouTube ads, generate some revenue that way. Sometimes having a separate channel where you put your clips, like if you keep your clips and your main channel separate, sometimes that can, give you a little boost in views that can generate a little bit of extra revenue for you. You can do things like merch for the audio podcast side of things. Platforms like Anchor FM have options where you can record your own ads and then, sort of automatically inject them into your episodes and earn a little bit of revenue from that. There's licensing agreements. If you join a podcast network, oftentimes they will work with ad networks to get ads into your podcast and then give you a cut of that revenue as well. Yeah, I mean, and then just get creative with it. You can use your podcast maybe to promote certain other areas where you monetize. For example, I do by the hour consulting on the side. I could, pitch this little side hustle thing I guess I have within podcasting to say, hey, if you're interested in anything I had to say and you'd like to pick my brain a little bit more, you could always hit the link in the description of this video and hire me for a 1 hour consulting call, and we can talk all things podcasting. There's tons of options out there for you. You just got to be a little bit creative. It's not going to help you with your reach. If anything, you need to work on building your reach first so that you can more effectively monetize later on. And finally, question number 7, how can I differentiate my video podcast from the competition and stand out in a crowded marketplace? I want to make sure that my podcast is unique and offers something that other podcasts do not. Well, I think step number 1 is understanding who your competitors are. And, you got to spend some time studying them. You got to make sure that you got to know what they're all about. You got to see what some of the things are that they're doing. It's not always, I don't think you have to reinvent the wheel every time. I think, there are some best practices within podcasting that are, it's probably in your best interest to stick to them. And then in other instances, there are things that you could do differently. You might have a certain niche where you look at all the, you're noticing that all these other podcasts within that niche do this one thing specifically all the time. And maybe you think that that's not necessary. You could maybe depart from that a little bit and try it from a different angle. But really it just comes down to research and experimentation, and just being creative with things, trying out new segments, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't. But differentiation. Yeah, I also think being unique sometimes is it's a little overrated to be unique. You want to be the best. People like to be entertained, and they like to be educated, and they like to be informed. How can you do one or all of those things better than others? Maybe there's a podcast you listen to and you're like, man, I really like this podcast, and they give a lot of good information, but it's just so boring, or it takes them so long to get to the point, or maybe just the information is missing some substance. How can you elaborate and give more than some of these other podcasters? And a lot of times all that stuff just comes down to preparation and everything you do leading up to the podcast. You can work on like a rebrand of some kind, like content aside. Maybe your podcast branding needs a little bit of a revamp. Maybe it's a little bit boring. Maybe it's not eye-catching. Maybe it's not interesting to people at a glance. They say don't judge a book by its cover, but in this day and age, when when a thumbnail can determine whether or not someone actually clicks on a video of yours, everyone's judging a book by its cover. So consider, looking at your branding. If you're not a graphic designer and you design something yourself, maybe you have a graphic designer friend take a look at your stuff and give their thoughts on it. It also, that's the other thing too. You can reach out to people and get some feedback. Ask people, friends, family, people who might be interested in your podcast to give you feedback on what you could do differently. But it is a crowded marketplace for sure. Podcasting is definitely oversaturated at the moment. It is very hard to stick out, especially if you're brand new, or if you're a smaller podcast, or if you have a very small niche. It's hard to break out. There's a few big players now, and it's not like it used to be back in the day where there were much fewer podcasts and it was a little bit easier to rise to the top. It's not quite as easy anymore. So it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of effort. I'm in that same position as well. I'm still kind of working my way up the ladder. And it's tough. But I'm still in an experimental phase myself, and that can be a fun place to be for a while because you really don't have any boundaries on you. You can kind of do whatever you want. So play around, experiment, get some feedback, and I think that's my tip there. ChatGPT finishes up by saying, overall, my goal in this meeting is to gain actionable insights and strategies that will help me improve my video podcast's reach, engagement, and monetization potential. I didn't tell you to ask me about monetization, but at the same time, I feel like, most people are that want to start a podcast or do really anything online are interested in monetization. Nobody wants to go put a bunch of effort into something and then just never be compensated for it, right? So anyway, all right, well, good ChatGPT. We're going to work on our prompts a little bit. I want you to be a little bit more specific next time with some of the things you ask me. Still a little underwhelmed. Maybe I'll try Bing next time. I've heard there's some interesting things going on with Bing's new AI thing, whatever it is. Some people having some very interesting conversations with Bing. But anyway, AI is interesting. ChatGPT is interesting. I'm having fun with this series. If you have a specific topic that you want me to have ChatGPT ask me about for next episode, leave me a comment in the description below and we will make it happen. And that'll do it for this week's episode. Thank you for being here. If you are still with me and if you got any value out of this episode, please consider liking and subscribing wherever you happen to be watching or listening. Follow me on social media at Ryan Hafey on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Check the description for relevant links and gear recommendations, and we will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.